After 40 years, Bill Gates can't stop viruses on his own operating system, but he thinks he can fix this. I find it so funny how in the climate change debate, everyone likes to harp on credentials as if someone who isn't a climate scientist can't have an opinion, but this never applies to Bill Gates, the epidemiologist now. Weird. Anyway, we're going to look at what he says in several interviews regarding his vaccine train wreck and why he decided to skip several safety steps, because harming people is really what philanthropy is all about. Starting with Bloomberg, we see he's put $350 million in vaccine research just for Wufu alone. They ask about hydroxychloroquine, which they say has been repeatedly shown to be ineffective, which would be true only if you count the garbage studies that I've mentioned and ignore the ones that show 50% decreases in death. And in fact, causes heart problems. If Bloomberg talked to a real doctor, they'd know doctors don't give HCQ to people with heart problems. This is actually 40-year-old news. Anyway, Bill Gates responds saying, "This is an age of science, but sometimes it doesn't feel that way." Wow, so in an age of science, we have this guy who is funding vaccines, also behind a study that makes HCQ look ineffective, but actually is a single blind study using asymptomatic subjects and uses a prophylactic as a placebo. What a reliable guy. For those of you who don't know, when you use a placebo in a study, it is not supposed to have an effect on someone. So one group will get the real drug, the other group will get like a sugar pill. He gave him vitamin C, which would actually give you positive benefits. So he also mentions that HCQ has severe side effects. Well, yeah, if you give it to people with heart problems, which doctors already don't do. Again, no one had problems with this drug before Trump mentioned it, but now it has severe side effects all of a sudden. Well, maybe you shouldn't give a toxic dose of 2,400 milligrams a day, pretend it's the drug that's dangerous when you're letting patients die for political points. But hey, if there are successful treatments, let alone treatments with very cheap drugs, how will Bill Gates make any money off his vaccine investments? Now just remember he's investing in these while he talks in these interviews as if we have zero treatments already being used effectively in dozens of countries. Well, his vaccines won't have severe side effects, right?
The Moderna vaccines sound concerning. After the second dose, at least 80% of participants experienced a systemic side effect, ranging from severe chills to fevers. So, are these vaccines safe?
Well, the FDA, not being pressured, will look hard at that. The FDA is the gold standard of regulators, and their current guidance on this, if they stick with that, is very, very appropriate.
The FDA is a gold standard in the same way panties are the best face mask. We've actually known the FDA is corrupt since the AIDS outbreak, when they pushed the drug AZT even though it had previously been abandoned for being too toxic and barely extended a patient's life. But it was really expensive, so the FDA made a lot of money from the ad industry. They've been forced to recall 4,000 drugs they previously approved because the drugs are dangerous. And when the FDA isn't bribed, they can sometimes delay the approval of good drugs like the cancer treatment Provenge, the unavailability of which led to an estimated 82,000 deaths. Gold standard of where, Bill? The Soviet Union?
And you know, the side effects were not super severe. That is, it didn't cause permanent health problems for the things there. Moderna did have to go with a fairly high dose, and so to get the antibodies. Some of the other vaccines are able to go with lower doses to get responses that are pretty high, including the J&J and the Pfizer. And so there's a lot of characteristics of these vaccines. It's great that we have multiple of them.
He's not giving a straight answer. What's the strategy here, Bob? Well, I think by saying they weren't super severe, he tried to soften the blow of his vaccines having side effects, but then quickly changed the topic because he realized that was a bad move and he starts, saying, he's going to need to get his defenses in shape for the second half, Tim.
But the data showed that everybody with a high dose had a side effect.
Yeah, but some of that is not dramatic, where, it's just, super painful. But
you hear that? It's only super painful. Thank God we can reduce the chance of getting a severe fever by injecting something super painful. Not that we even know the efficacy of this, by the way. Flu vaccines barely even work themselves. I've never even taken a flu vaccine in my life. I've never even gotten the flu. So what does that mean? I'll wash my hands without the government telling me to? Amazing. Regarding a question of when the vaccine will come out, he says this.
People like myself and Tony Fauci are saying 18 months. If everything went perfectly, we could do slightly better than that. But there will be a trade-off. We'll have less safety testing than we typically would have. And so governments will have to decide, do they indemnify the companies and really say, let's go out with this? when we just don't have the time to do what we normally do. So 18 months.
Wait. We don't have time for safety? This is not the Black Plague bill. At the current stage, the death rate has fallen dramatically, but we don't have time? By the way, he's not really the only one skipping safety steps. Bill's vaccine is called Moderna. The Yale vaccine is also skipping safety steps, and the Oxford vaccine barely had any effect, but the media is pretending it's very promising. Why? Because the monkeys didn't die? What a high standard. Well, according to the typical vaccine timeline, we've got, at minimum, 5 years before a vaccine is ready to be safely distributed, but a maximum of 18 years. But now we need this in 18 months.
If you want to wait and see if a side effect shows up 2 years later, that takes 2 years. So
The age of science, everyone.
How many doses of the vaccine will we need?
Well, none of the vaccines at this point appear like they'll work with a single dose. We hope just 2, although in the elderly, sometimes it takes more. And so making sure we have lots of elderly people in the trial will give us that data.
In the age of science, we ignore safety and inject extra when it doesn't work. Do you also pull the door that says push until it opens?
Turns out the flu vaccine isn't that effective in elderly people. Most of the benefit comes from younger people not spreading it because they're vaccinated. Here, we clearly need a vaccine that works in the upper age range because they're most at risk of that.
Well, he's right. The flu shot doesn't work on the elderly very well, but the elderly are also the most at risk for the flu, for corona, and literally all things that lead to death. For a program, your logic really sucks.
But you don't have a choice. People act like you have a choice. Normalcy only returns when we've largely vaccinated the entire global population. And
Of all the diseases humanity has faced throughout history, this 1% death rate is keeping us from normalcy. And that's why we need a rush vaccine that skips safety steps, and we will be forced to get it. Yeah, you first, Bill.
governments will have to be involved because there will be some risk and indemnification needed.
To be clear, indemnification here means no one will be allowed to sue the administrators of the vaccine if there are side effects or deaths. So, we have no choice. If anything bad happens, no compensation. What a fucking psychopath. It actually gets worse, though, because Bill is also a climatologist, apparently. He had this to say about 10 years ago.
You've got a thing on the left, CO2, that you want to get to zero, and that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to zero. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to zero. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Now, besides the fact that reducing CO2 emissions to zero would kill hundreds of millions of people, his last sentence is quite bizarre, don't you think? How would better healthcare lower the population? I honestly thought I was misinterpreting it. I showed this to several people. But it actually seems like he's saying by making more people get vaccines and having more reproductive health, that means abortions, we can lower the population. I wish there was a reliable source for the effects of his vaccine work in Africa and India, where he bypassed Western restrictions to use those people as guinea pigs. But at this point, I'll bet my left testicle more people die from government responses to the virus than the virus itself. And I would hope that you make an informed decision about any vaccine the media or government tries to push on you. You know, not too long ago, people talking like Bill Gates does would be thrown in the fucking loony bin.